The silver dollar rang sharp against the counter, rolling once before it stilled. The saloon went quiet. Boots scuffed on warped floorboards, glasses clinked in nervous hands. A man in a dust-worn coat stood there, his face carved hard by sun and years. He did not look down at the coin. He only said, low and final, "That buys the ranch." The barkeep hesitated, eyes darting to the shadows where card players paused mid-hand. Someone spat in the sawdust. "You're paying for your grave, stranger," a voice muttered. Laughter followed, but it was thin, uneasy. He took the papers, signed without a tremor, then folded them into his breast pocket. His boots struck the saloon steps like a drumbeat as he left. Outside, the town lay under a pitiless sky. Dust swirled in lazy devils across the main street. The lone horse tied at the post shifted, snorted, as though it too heard the whispers. No one comes back from that place. By sundown, he rode through stretches of brittle grass, the outline of the ranch rising against a bruised horizon. A windmill creaked, slow and mournful. Shattered fence posts leaned like broken soldiers along the trail. The house itself crouched on the earth, its roof sagging, shutters hanging loose, windows blind with dust. A buzzard lifted from the ridgepole, black wings blotting the last of the light. The rider dismounted, boots crunching on gravel. The front porch groaned under his weight. Hinges screamed when he pressed the door, but it gave, swinging inward into silence. Inside smelled of what gone damp, of dust, and something faintly sweet, like old blood or spoiled grain. Floorboards complained beneath his step. A chair lay tipped in the corner. A kettle rusted cold on the stove. Cobwebs trailed across the beams, trembling in the draft. He moved through the room slow, eyes sharp, hand brushing the butt of the revolver at his hip. Nothing stirred, only the hush of a place abandoned. Only his breath. Night came sudden. He lit a lantern, the glow spilling yellow across warped planks. In the bedroom, a bed stood unmade, sheet tangled as if someone had risen in haste. He touched the frame. Dust thick, but the print of a hand showed where someone had disturbed it recently. His jaw tightened. From the loft above, a sound, not the settling of timber, not the scurry of rats. A breath, soft, human. He did not call out. He only turned, lantern lifted, gun drawn. His boots climbed slow, one step at a time. The ladder groaned beneath his weight. At the top, shadows pressed thick. He held the lantern high. Light licked across stacked crates, burlap sacks, an old trunk. Then movement. A figure crouched back in the corner, eyes flashing wild in the glow. A girl. Dust streaked her hair, face smudged, clothes ragged from long wear. She clutched a kitchen knife tight, her chest heaving. For a long moment, neither spoke. The lantern hissed. Outside, coyotes yipped far across the plain. He lowered the barrel of his revolver, just slightly. "You live here?" Her eyes narrowed. She did not answer, only raised the knife higher. He set the lantern on a crate, easing his voice. "This house belongs to you." Still silence, except the rasp of her breath. Her hands shook, but not from fear alone. There was defiance there, coiled and burning. "You'll not drive me out," she said finally, her voice hoarse, but sharp as broken glass. He studied her, the lines of her face, the thinness of her arms, the stubborn fire behind her eyes. He slid the revolver back into its holster slow. "I paid for the land." "Paid?" Her laugh came bitter, a short bark. $1. That's what they told you, wasn't it? She stepped from the corner, the knife trembling in her grip. "You bought bones. You bought blood." The lantern light wavered on her face, and in her eyes was something deeper than hunger. Something older, a grief that had set like stone. Downstairs, the wind pressed against the shutters, rattling them loose. The house groaned as if remembering. He did not move toward her. He only stood there, steady, letting her words hang in the dust-thick air. "Then tell me whose." The knife lowered just a little. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She pressed her back to the wall, eyes flicking toward the dark corners as though expecting ghosts to speak for her. Finally, she whispered, "Mine." The lantern hissed louder, its flame leaning with the draft. Somewhere outside, the windmill turned slow, blades shrieking like iron in pain. He gave one small nod, as if that answer was enough. Then it's not empty land I bought. She frowned, confusion sharpening into suspicion. You leave by dawn. They all do. His gaze held hers, firm as stone. I've left enough in my life. The house fell still again, but the tension did not fade. It wrapped the rafters, settled into the floorboards, breathed between them. Down in the valley, the coyotes sang louder, their howls chasing the stars. And in the creaking bones of the house, with one silver coin still warm in his pocket, the bargain had only just begun. The knife clattered to the floor. Her shoulders sagged, breath hitching as if she'd carried too many winters alone. In the lantern glow, her hands trembled when she pressed them against her face. Don't, she whispered. Don't make me tell it. But the words came anyway, spilling raw, jagged. They came at sundown. Her voice was flat, like something worn smooth from being told to herself too many times. Riders. 6 of them. Faces covered, guns out. They wanted the land. Pa wouldn't sell. Ma stood in the doorway with the baby. She stopped. Her throat closed. She bit down hard, teeth grinding. They shot her first. Then Pa. Then the barn went up. I ran. I hid. When I came back, her eyes glazed, seeing it fresh. Ashes. Bones. Nothing left but this house. So I stayed, always waiting for them to come back. The man's jaw tightened. He did not speak, only listened. His hands curled slow at his sides, scarred knuckles white. She turned away, arms wrapping around herself. They took everything. Everything but the dirt under these walls. It's mine. Mine alone. Outside, the wind rattled loose shingles. The lantern sputtered. He bent, picked up the knife from the floor, turned in the light, then set it gently back on a crate. You've been alone since? Her eyes flashed. I learned to hunt, to trap, to fight. I ain't weak. No, he said. His voice was low, steady as a drumbeat. You're not. For the first time, the edge in her gaze wavered. She studied him, his worn coat, the soldier's way he carried himself, the silence heavy as iron about him. Who are you, then? Why come here? He didn't answer at once. The silence stretched until the night pressed against the walls. Finally, a man tired of running. She tilted her head. From what? But he only shook his head. His eyes, when they met hers, carried shadows older than the house itself. She did not ask again. Downstairs, the fire caught. Sparks snapped in the hearth, throwing sharp light against the cracked plaster. She sat opposite him, knees drawn tight to her chest, watching. He poured black coffee from a dented tin pot, the steam twisting between them. He set one cup across the table. She eyed it suspicious, then reached. Her hand shook as she lifted it, but she drank. The air between them shifted, fragile as glass. From a far distance came the faint drum of hooves. Both froze. She bolted upright, eyes wide. They're back. He rose slow, rifle already in hand, listening. The sound faded, far along the ridge, not yet near. Coyotes yipped in answer. Her breath came quick. She pressed her back to the wall, knife once more in her grip. They always come. They'll hear you're here. They'll want again. They don't stop. He set the rifle across the table, calm, deliberate. Then we'll be ready. Her head snapped toward him, disbelief sharpening into something fiercer. You'd stay? You'd fight them. The fire crackled, throwing sparks up the chimney. His face was carved hard in the glow, but his voice was steady. This land cost me $1, but if you say it's yours, then I reckon it's worth a life. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then her knife lowered, inch by inch. They worked by lantern light. He fixed hinges, nailed planks across broken shutters. She dragged water from the well, her shoulders straining but unyielding. Together, they lifted boards, set traps, stacked stones where fence once stood. Through the hours, silence held between them, but it was no longer hollow. It was the silence of work, of two hearts moving to the same rhythm. When dawn broke, the house stood stronger, though scarred. The light fell across her face, streaking her hair gold despite the dirt. She watched him from the porch, sweat dark on his shirt, hammer heavy in his grip. You're no rancher, she said quietly. He paused, eyes narrowing. I seen how you move, how you listen. You've killed men before. The hammer stilled. He set it down slow, wiping his hands on his coat. War teaches ugly things. She stepped closer, chin raised. Then, teach me. His gaze snapped to hers. If they're coming, she said, steady as stone, I won't hide again. I won't run. I'll fight. You'll show me how. He studied her a long moment. Then, wordless, he walked inside. When he came back, he carried an old revolver, the metal dull but sound. He held it out. Her hands closed around it, trembling, but she did not falter. He adjusted her grip, slow, patient. Not too tight. Breathe. Sight along the barrel. She raised it toward the empty field. The shot cracked, echoing sharp across the valley. Birds scattered in a black cloud. She lowered the gun, ears ringing, chest heaving. He nodded once. Again. By midday, smoke curled from the chimney, and the echoes of gunfire rolled from the hills. Each shot steadier than the last. Her stance stronger. Her eyes brighter, though still shadowed by what had been lost. At dusk, she leaned the revolver against the porch rail, shoulders aching but proud. He watched her in silence. They'll hear, she said, glancing toward the horizon. They'll know someone's here again. Yes, he said. His voice was flat, but his eyes burned. Let them. The windmill turned slow, its blades shrieking like a warning. Somewhere beyond the canyon, riders gathered, and in the fading light, the house no longer looked abandoned. It stood waiting, a place no longer empty, but alive with fire. Spurs scraped against the saloon floor. The door banged open, and dust boiled in with the riders. 6 shadows spilled inside, their coats long, their hats low, the smell of horse and gunpowder clinging like smoke. The piano went silent. Cards dropped from a gambler's hand. Every man in the room shifted, but no one rose. The one in front, a broad man with a scar cutting his cheek, slammed his palm on the bar. Whiskey, in word. His voice rasped like gravel. He leaned close to the barkeep, eyes narrowing. Who's squatting the ranch? The barkeep's hands shook as he poured, glass rattling. No answer. The man's fist came down hard. We rode this valley 10 years. That land's ours. If someone thinks otherwise, he smiled, but it was a wolf smile. We'll set him straight. Chairs scraped. Folks ducked their heads, staring hard at the floorboards. No one spoke. The gang drained their glasses, then turned, boots thudding out the door. Outside, their horses stamped, eager for the road west. By nightfall, firelight burned in the hills. The ranch stood quiet, lanterns dim behind shutters. The girl sat on the porch steps, rifle across her knees, watching the dark. Her jaw was tight, her eyes sharp. Inside, the man laid out tools on the table, bullets lined neat, rifle gleaming clean, revolver oiled. His movements were steady, deliberate. He worked with the silence of habit, every gesture sharpened by memory. The girl called through the door. They're coming, aren't they? He did not look up, only clicked the chamber shut, the sound cold in the room. Her boots creaked as she stepped inside. She studied him, the way his hands moved sure and quick. You've done this before. Too many times. He met her gaze. His eyes were dark, heavy with ghosts. It doesn't get easier. She set her rifle down, sat opposite him. Then teach me the rest. His hand paused on a cartridge, then slid it across the table toward her. The first raid came past midnight. Hooves thundered in the yard. Shadows streaked across the windows. A rock smashed through glass. A voice roared, "Come out, old man, or we'll burn you out." The man rose, rifle in hand, lantern low behind him. The girl crouched at the window, breath sharp in her chest, finger tight on the trigger. The door rattled under a boot, then splintered. The first outlaw charged through, met by the crack of a rifle. He fell heavy, his revolver clattering across the floor. Smoke curled from the barrel in her trembling hands. Her eyes widened, but she did not freeze. She racked the bolt again. Another shadow burst through. The man's rifle barked once, thunder splitting the room. The outlaw spun and dropped. The rest cursed, ducking back, firing wild through the windows. Glass shattered, wood splintered. The girl slid low, crawling to the other side. She raised the rifle, aimed through the gap in the shutter. The shot rang true. A horse screamed and bolted. Men cursed, retreating into the dark. Silence fell, broken only by the windmill's groan. The girl's breath came ragged, her knuckles white on the rifle. She looked at the man. He gave one curt nod. She had not run. Morning brought no peace. The valley lay heavy, still, as though holding its breath. The man stood on the ridge, hat pulled low, watching dust trails vanish to the east. The girl joined him, eyes searching the horizon. "They'll come back stronger," she said. "Yes." Her voice wavered, but she forced it steady. "Then we make ready." They worked without pause. Trenches dug by the barn. Wires stretched across the path. Buckets of water lined along the porch. Every sound, the thud of the shovel, the clang of hammer on nail, beat like a drum against the waiting silence. At dusk, he pulled from a chest an old medal, tarnished, edges worn. He turned it over in his palm, thumb pressing deep. Then, with quiet finality, he set it on the mantel, leaving it behind. The girl watched but asked no question. That night, as the fire cracked low, she whispered, "Who were you before all this?" His eyes stayed on the flames. Shadows carved deep across his face. A man they called by another name. A name that drew blood. She leaned closer. "And now?" He lifted his gaze, steel in it. "Now I keep what's left." Outside, the coyotes wailed. In town, whispers spread like wildfire, of riders stirring, of guns being loaded, of a reckoning that would come at dawn. The ranch stood in silence, but inside its walls, two figures waited, steady and unyielding. And across the valley, the Sacketts gathered, sharpening knives, tightening saddles, hungry for the land they thought theirs. The desert air thickened with dust and dread. The stage was set. Gunfire split the morning. Dust leapt from the road as bullets tore into the fence posts. Horses screamed, hooves hammering the hardpan. The gang came fast, 6 across, their coats whipping, revolvers flashing in the sun. The man stood in the center of the road, coat drawn back, rifle steady in his hands. Behind him, the girl crouched on the porch roof, eyes sharp, revolver braced against the shingles. The first outlaw raised his gun, too slow. The man's rifle cracked, thunder rolling off the canyon walls. The rider pitched backward, boots catching in the stirrups, his horse dragging him down the dusted street. The others fanned wide, firing wild. Bullets spat against the house, tore splinters from the rail. The girl fired once, twice. One rider toppled, his hat spinning loose, his horse bolting riderless into the scrub. The gang cursed, circling like wolves. The scar-faced leader spurred forward, eyes burning, revolver steady. "Old man," he roared, "that land was ours. You think you can take it for $1?" The man shifted, calm as stone. His rifle spoke again. The leader's hat flew, but his skull was left untouched. A warning, not an end. The gang pulled rein, shock flashing in their eyes. The girl's shot cracked again, grazing another shoulder. He shrieked, clutching blood. Smoke thickened. Horses reared. The townsfolk, gathered in doorways and windows, watched with breath held tight. The leader sneered, but there was a flicker in his gaze now. Recognition. He leaned toward his men, his sharp. "That ain't no rancher. That's him, the sharpshooter." The name passed like a curse, though no one spoke it aloud. In the war, he'd been whispered about, the ghost in blue, the one shot that always found its mark. Men fell without seeing him. Armies feared him. Now here he stood, a lone figure in the dust, rifle raised steady, eyes cold and clear. The girl looked down at him, breath quick, realization dawning. The scar-faced leader's voice cracked the air. "Kill him." They charged. The man moved with the calm of memory. His rifle thundered, one after another, every shot true. Riders fell, dust swallowing their bodies. Horses screamed, scattered. The girl's revolver spat fire beside him, her hands no longer trembling, her voice sharp with each shot she cried. The leader swerved, dragging one last rider beside him, charging straight. Bullets tore past, close, but he pressed harder, closer. His revolver raised, barrel black with smoke. The girl cried out, firing wild but missed. The leader leveled the gun, aimed true at the man's chest. The rifle cracked. The leader froze, eyes wide. His revolver slipped from his hand. He slid sideways from the saddle, thudding heavy into the dust. Silence swallowed the street. Smoke drifted thin in the morning sun. The girl clambered down, boots striking the ground, chest heaving. She looked at the man, standing steady still, rifle lowered now, face carved from stone. The last outlaw crawled from the dust, clutching at his leg. He looked up, terror bright in his eyes. "Mercy," he gasped. "Please, mercy." The girl's jaw tightened, her finger twitching on the trigger. But the man stepped forward, blocking her aim. His voice came low, iron in it. "The law will have you, not me." He hauled the outlaw to his feet, shoved him toward the watching townsfolk. The man stumbled, fell at their boots, and the people of the town closed in around him, shackles in their hands. The girl stared at the veteran, breathless. Why spare him? He looked at her, weary shadows in his eyes. Because vengeance ends in ash. Justice lasts longer. The townsfolk gathered, whispers rising. Faces turned toward him, wide-eyed, hushed with awe. The girl stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm, her eyes fierce and bright. The scar-faced leader lay still in the dust. His men lay broken in the road. The ranch stood tall against the horizon, battered, scarred but standing. The man turned, gazing across the land, the wind brushing his coat, the sky stretching wide and endless above. He said nothing. The girl stood beside him, her shoulders squared, her eyes alive again. Not a ghost anymore. And the old storyteller's voice lingered in the air, as though carried by the wind itself. They say he bought that ranch for $1. But what he truly bought was a legend. For when the riders came, and the dust rose thick, he stood where no other would. A soldier turned ghost, a ghost turned man, and a man turned legend. And the girl who lived in the shadows of grief stood with him. Together, they wrote a tale still told when the desert wind howls through the canyon. The rifle hung quiet at his side. The windmill creaked slow, and the valley, once cursed, breathed free again.